Hey everyone, and welcome back to Uncle Sam Fun English. I'm Theus.
And I'm Belle. Ready for another exciting lesson?
Absolutely. Today we're tackling the conversation shortcut. Master English flow in 15 minutes a day.
Feeling stuck in English conversations is super frustrating.
We're going to give you a simple daily method to unlock fluent communication.
Let's dive in.
So Belle, what's the biggest struggle you see learners face when trying to have conversations in English?
I think it's that feeling of being stuck, not knowing what to say next. You understand the grammar, you know vocabulary, but the words just don't flow naturally when you're actually talking to someone. A common mistake is overthinking and translating word for word from their native language, which makes the conversation sound unnatural and stilted.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like you're building a sentence in your head before you even say it, and by the time you're ready, the conversation has already moved on. Does that happen to a lot of people?
Absolutely. It's because they're focusing too much on being perfect and not enough on just communicating. They're worried about making mistakes, so they hesitate, and that hesitation breaks the flow. This happens because they haven't internalized common phrases and conversational fillers.
Right. So instead of thinking, how do I translate this complex thought? They should be able to just pull out a phrase like, you know what I mean? Or, that's a good point. Things like that?
Exactly. And it's not just about knowing those phrases. It's about knowing when and how to use them. It's about understanding the rhythm of natural conversation. The impact of this hesitation can be huge. It can lead to missed opportunities in job interviews, awkward social interactions, or even just feeling frustrated and discouraged from continuing to learn English.
Totally. It's like when you're trying to remember someone's name and the silence just hangs there, making everything 10 times worse. It can be crippling to your confidence, for sure.
Precisely. They might know a lot of vocabulary and grammar, but the lack of fluency in conversational fillers and flow enhancers creates a barrier. It's like having all the ingredients to bake a cake but not knowing how to mix them together. So how do we fix this lack of conversational flow?
I agree completely. How do we fix this feeling of speaking unnaturally in English?
Well, the key is to actively learn and practice common conversational phrases and filler words. Incorporate them into your daily practice, even when you're talking to yourself. It's like learning a dance. You practice the steps until they become second nature. Okay. So the first shortcut to improving your English conversation flow is to focus on linking words and phrases. They're like the glue that holds your sentences together.
Linking words? Can you give me a specific example of what you mean?
Sure. Instead of just saying, I went to the store, I bought milk, you can say, I went to the store, and I bought milk. And is a simple linking word.
Okay, that makes sense. So, instead of short, choppy sentences, we use these linking words to create a smoother flow. Like, I wanted to go to the park, but it was raining.
Exactly. But is another great linking word. See how much smoother that sounds. You're connecting your ideas instead of presenting them as separate, disconnected thoughts.
Right. So, if I wanted to say that I was tired, but I still went to the gym, I could say, although I was tired, I still went to the gym. Is that a good use of although?
Yes, that's perfect. Although shows a contrast, just like but it often sounds a little more formal. And notice how you placed it at the beginning of the sentence to create a more complex thought.
Got it. So, are there other common linking words or phrases that we should know about?
Absolutely. Besides and but, try using because to explain reasons, so to show results, and therefore to introduce conclusions. For example, I studied hard because I wanted to pass the exam. Or, it was raining, so I took an umbrella. Therefore, if you study hard, you'll likely improve.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the hang of this. So, if I wanted to say that I like both coffee and tea, I could just say, I like coffee and tea, right? That's using and effectively?
Yes, precisely. Now, let's add a bit more complexity. Instead of just and, you could also use not only, but also. For example, I like not only coffee but also tea. It adds a bit more emphasis.
Oh, that's a good tip. So, linking words aren't just about connecting simple sentences, but also about adding nuance and emphasis?
Precisely. They help you express your ideas with greater clarity and sophistication. Think of it as leveling up your conversation skills.
Okay, so what are some other examples where linking words can make a big difference in how we sound?
Well, consider using in addition to add more information. For example, I love to read. In addition, I enjoy writing. Or you could use furthermore for a similar effect. The movie was fantastic. Furthermore, the acting was superb.
So, in addition, and furthermore, are like slightly more formal ways of saying, and.
Yes, exactly. They add a layer of formality and sophistication to your speech. They're great for presentations or more serious conversations. But remember, don't overuse them, or you'll sound like a robot.
Haha, good point. So, it's all about finding the right balance and using the linking words that fit the situation and the tone of the conversation.
Absolutely. And it's about practicing. The more you use these words, the more natural they'll become. You'll start to use them without even thinking about it.
So, the key takeaway here is to actively incorporate linking words into our everyday conversations to improve our English flow?
Exactly. Start with simple ones like and, but, and, because, and then gradually add more sophisticated ones like furthermore, therefore, and in addition. You'll be amazed at how much smoother your English sounds.
So Belle, what about when we're talking about something that happened regularly in the past? How does that impact which structure we should use?
That's a great question. When describing habitual actions or states in the past, we often use used to or would. But understanding the nuance is essential. Used to implies something that is no longer true, while would is generally used for actions, not states.
Okay, so used to is for things that are no longer happening. Could you give me a clear example to illustrate the difference?
Absolutely. You could say, I used to live in New York, meaning you don't live there anymore. But you wouldn't say, I would live in New York, to convey the same meaning. However, if you're describing a recurring action, like, I would go to the park every Sunday, that works.
Ah, I see the distinction. So, used to can describe a past state or action that's finished, but would focuses on repeated actions in the past. Could I say, I used to be shy, and that implies I'm not shy anymore?
Precisely. I used to be shy clearly indicates a change in your personality. But you wouldn't say, I would be shy, to mean the same thing. Would is better for describing repeated actions, like, when I was a kid, I would always hide behind my mom.
Got it. So, used to, for states and habits that are no longer true, and would, mainly for repeated actions in the past. Is there ever a situation where they overlap or can be used interchangeably?
While there's some overlap in describing habits, used to is generally broader. For instance, you can say, I used to play the piano, which implies you don't anymore. You could also say, I would play the piano after school, but this focuses more on the routine action.
Okay, that makes sense. So, if I want to emphasize the routine or habit aspect, would might be a better choice. But if I want to simply state that something happened in the past and doesn't now, used to is the way to go. What about negative sentences?
In negative sentences, used to typically becomes didn't used to. For example, I didn't used to like coffee, but now I do. You can't really use would in negative statements to describe past states in the same way. Wouldn't is used in conditional sentences or to describe a refusal in the past.
So, I can say, I didn't used to enjoy running, but I couldn't say, I wouldn't enjoy running, to mean the same thing about my past dislike. But could I say, I wouldn't go near the haunted house?
Exactly. I wouldn't go near the haunted house means you refused to go near it at that time. It expresses volition, not just a past state. It's about your willingness or unwillingness to do something.
That's a really helpful clarification. So, used to is for past states or habitual actions that are now finished, and would is primarily for describing repeated actions or refusals in the past. Are there any exceptions or nuances we should be aware of?
Yes, there's one important nuance. Would is often used in storytelling to set the scene and describe habitual actions that were part of a past setting. For example, in that small town, people would gather at the town square every evening.
Ah, I see. So, it's more about painting a picture of the past and describing the typical actions that occurred in that setting. So, it is more of a descriptive element.
Precisely. It helps create a sense of atmosphere and paint a vivid picture of life in that past time. You're setting the stage for the narrative.
Okay, so if I were writing a story about my childhood, I might say, we would always build forts in the woods behind our house, to describe a regular activity. But if I were talking about a specific belief I no longer hold, I'd say, I used to believe in the tooth fairy.
Absolutely perfect. Your examples demonstrate a clear understanding of the differences between used to and would. You're using them correctly to convey different aspects of the past. You could even combine them.
Okay, tell me more. How can I combine them?
You can combine them in a narrative. For example, I used to be afraid of the dark, so my dad would always tell me stories to help me fall asleep. Used to describes your former state, and would describes your dad's habitual action to soothe you.
That's a great way to combine them. It really highlights how they work together to paint a more complete picture of the past. Anything else I should know?
Just remember the core function of each. Used to is about past states or habits that are no longer true, while would focuses on repeated actions, especially in narratives or when describing routines. Practice using them in different contexts, and you'll master them in no time.
Great. This has been incredibly helpful, Belle. I feel much more confident in using used to and would correctly now. Thanks for clearing up those nuances.
You're very welcome, Theus. Remember, language learning is a journey. Keep practicing, and you'll continue to improve. Okay, let's consider even more advanced situations. What if you're in a meeting and someone uses a phrase you're not familiar with?
That happens all the time. What if someone says something like, let's table that discussion for now? I might not know what table means in that context.
Exactly. So, to table something means to postpone or delay a discussion until a later time. It's a handy phrase to know in a professional setting. For example, we're running out of time, so let's table the marketing discussion for next week's meeting.
Ah, I see. So, it's not about putting something on a table, it's about delaying it. That's good to know. What if someone uses it in the past tense, like, we tabled that issue last month?
Precisely. It means the issue was postponed last month. Remember, the key is to listen for the context. If it's in a business meeting or formal conversation, it's likely referring to postponing something. It is important to note that in some dialects, tabling something can mean to bring it up for discussion. Be mindful of cultural context.
And if you're finding this helpful, don't forget to subscribe to Uncle Sam Fun English. We're always adding new lessons to help you improve your English.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about another tricky situation. What if you're trying to explain something complex and you need to simplify it for someone?
That's a great point, Belle. Sometimes I struggle to explain technical things in a way that everyone can understand.
One helpful strategy is to use analogies. An analogy is a comparison between two things that are similar in some way. For instance, if you're explaining how a computer works, you could compare it to the human brain. The computer's CPU is like the brain, processing information and making decisions.
That makes sense. So, it's about finding something familiar that people can relate to. I could say, learning English is like building a house. You need a strong foundation of grammar and vocabulary before you can start adding the fancy decorations.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. It helps people understand the process in a more relatable way. Another tip is to use shorter sentences and simpler vocabulary when explaining complex topics.
So, instead of saying, the algorithm utilizes a complex heuristic to optimize the data processing, I could say, the computer uses a smart method to make the data work better.
That's a great simplification. Remember, the goal is to make the information accessible to everyone, regardless of their background or expertise. Another thing to keep in mind is to use visual aids whenever possible.
Like charts, graphs, or even just drawing a picture on a whiteboard?
Exactly. Visual aids can help people understand complex concepts more easily. For example, if you're explaining the sales process, you could create a flowchart that shows the different steps involved.
So, to recap, when explaining complex topics, use analogies, simplify your language, and use visual aids. And don't forget to ask for feedback to make sure people are understanding you. It is important to adapt to your audience. Don't be afraid to ask if your listener understands or if you need to clarify anything.
Let's practice. I'm going to give you a scenario, and you need to respond naturally in English. Ready? You're at a coffee shop, and you want to order a latte.
Okay, I think I know how to do this. I want a latte, please. Is that right? Or should I say, give me a latte?
That's a good start, but we can make it sound even more natural and polite. Saying, I want, can sound a little demanding. How about, could I get a latte, please?
Ah, that's much better. Could I get a latte, please? It sounds a bit more friendly, right? I can also say, can I get a latte?
Exactly. Both, could I get, and, can I get, work perfectly. You could also say, I'd like a latte, please. It's all about adding that touch of politeness.
Perfect. So, could I get a latte, please? Okay, let's try another one. I'm at a bookstore, and I'm looking for a specific book.
All right, you're looking for a book by Jane Austen. What do you say to the bookseller? What's the best way to ask?
Where is the Jane Austen book? Is too direct. Maybe, do you have any books by Jane Austen? Is that a good start?
That's good, but we can make it even better. Try something like, excuse me, do you carry any books by Jane Austen? The, excuse me, adds extra politeness.
Okay, excuse me, do you carry any books by Jane Austen? That sounds more natural. Can I say, are there any Jane Austen books around?
Yes, that works too. You could also ask, I'm looking for a book by Jane Austen. Can you help me find it? It's a more conversational approach.
Got it. So there are a few options. Now, what if they don't have the book? How do I react politely?
If they don't have it, you can say something like, oh, that's okay. Thank you for your help anyway. It shows appreciation for their effort.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you for your help anyway. Great. Now, let's try a situation where I need to ask for directions.
Okay, you're trying to find the nearest train station. What do you ask someone on the street?
I might say, where is the train station? But I remember that's too direct. How about, excuse me, where's the nearest train station?
Much better. And to be even more polite, you can add, could you tell me? So the full question would be, excuse me, could you tell me where the nearest train station is?
Excuse me, could you tell me where the nearest train station is? Okay, that sounds perfect. Can I also say, how can I get to the train station?
Yes, that's another good option. You can also say, I'm trying to find the train station. Am I going in the right direction? If you're already walking.
Okay, this is really helpful. So, politeness and context are key. What if I don't understand their directions?
If you don't understand, you can say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat that, please? Or, could you explain it in a different way?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat that, please? That's a great phrase to remember. So, always be polite and ask for clarification if needed.
Exactly. Now, let's practice one more scenario. You're at a restaurant, and you want to order something. What do you say?
Okay, instead of saying, I want the steak, I should say, I'd like the steak, please, or, could I have the steak, please?
Perfect. And if you have any questions about the menu, you can ask, what do you recommend? Or, could you tell me more about this dish?
What do you recommend? And, could you tell me more about this dish? Those are great phrases to use. This is all coming together now.
Wonderful. Also, remember that eye contact and a smile can make a big difference in how you're perceived.
Definitely. Body language is important too. So, be polite, make eye contact, and smile.
Exactly. One last tip. Try to listen carefully to the other person's response. This will help you understand and respond appropriately.
That makes sense. Active listening is crucial for a good conversation. Now, I think I'm ready to go out and practice.
Fantastic. Remember to be patient with yourself and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Learning a language takes time.
Thanks, Belle. I'll keep practicing, and hopefully, I'll be having fluent conversations in no time.
You've got this, Theus. And remember, Practice makes perfect. Don't give up, and keep using these phrases in your daily conversations.
I definitely will. Thanks for all the helpful tips and practice scenarios. I feel much more confident now.
You're welcome, Theus. And for our listeners, try practicing these phrases in your everyday interactions. The more you use them, the more natural they will become.
So, remember, focusing on natural phrases is the key to unlocking fluent English conversations.
A great tip is to listen to native speakers and actively note down expressions they use frequently.
Keep practicing, and you'll be speaking fluently before you know it.
Remember to subscribe to Uncle Sam Fun English for more lessons like this.
Thanks for listening. Keep practicing.
See you next time. Bye everyone.